Hello everyone. Here we are going to talk to all the managers out there about open data. This is to give you an understanding of what open data is, its core values, and how to implement open data for Queensland. My name is Martin, a master student in information management. My fellow speakers are Dave and John. Dave manages an information management service within Queensland government, and John is a master of information management. In the beginning of this talk, we are going to start with the general definition of the open data, then analyze two case studies from USA and Taiwan to try to give you some practical examples in the real world. Lately, we will apply these lessons learned from the previous examples to make some recommendations for the Queensland government. This is to create the strategies in which benefit the government departments and public from developing those open data. Now, I'd welcome John to talk about what is open data.
Thank you, Martin. What is open data? Open data generally means the data that made available to the public through the semantic web over the internet for free usage purposes, without discrimination against any person, group, or field of endeavor. For instance, a non-commercial license restrictions that prevents commercial use, or placing restrictions of use for certain purposes. A specific usage for education are examples of the data that is not open. Open data must be released without restrictions on the conditions of reuse or redistribution, including the intermixing with other datasets. Before making the data usable for public, there are some sets of rules that needed to be applied, including the first rule, the use of URI or Uniform Resource Identifier as names for things. URI is a string of characters used to identify a name or a web resource. The rule is about identifying things with the use of URIs. This is pretty much understood by most people doing the semantic web technology. If it doesn't use the universal URI set of symbols, we don't call it the semantic web. The second rule, the use of URIs that can be discovered so that people can look up those names. The rule applies to the use of the following URIs. The only difference is a constant tendency for people to invent new URI schemes and sub-schemes within the URN scheme, such as life science identifiers or LSIDs, which are the way to name and locate pieces of the information on the web. The third rule, when someone looks up a URI, useful information needs to be provided. The rule applying to the use of these standards such RDF or the Resource Description Framework, which is used as a general method for conceptual description or modeling of the information that is implemented in the web resources, using a variety of syntax notations and the data serialization formats. The fourth rule includes links to other URIs so that they can discover more things. The rule is to make links elsewhere. It is necessary to connect the data that we have into an insecure web in which anyone can find all kinds of things on the created hypertext web. The principles of open data for Queensland Premier. According to Premier message, the open data intends to be revolutionized for the government's agenda in which the data is open, accountable, and delivers the results that the public of Queensland expects. As the Queensland government plans to become a world leader in open data, some principles can be stated as follows. The government data should be available for open use under flexible licenses, allowing for reuse by the public, including by businesses, researchers, and individuals. The government data should be free of charge unless the cost is set by law or benefits the Queensland community and has been approved by Cabinet. The government data should be made for easily discoverable through the Queensland Government official website in accessible formats that promote its reuse. The government data should be made available in a timely and relevant manner, unless it is restricted for reasons of privacy, public safety, security, commercial confidentiality, or compliance with the law. Each agency will be accountable for the release of good quality data in accordance with such standards. For Queensland Premier benefits, falling under the Queensland Public Sector Renewal Program, the Open Data Initiative is intended to encourage people, companies, researchers, and non-government organizations to develop innovative solutions to Queenslanders' problems, help the government to be more transparent and accountable, drive growth and job creation in Queensland. The principles of open data for Queensland public. For Queenslanders, the usage of the open data should be done within this manner of distribution that satisfies the following conditions. For distribution of license, the rights should be attached and applied to those public users who will redistribute the data without the need for execution of an additional license by those parties. For license, they must not be specific to a package. The same rights should be applied to all parties as long as the use of the data is done within the terms of its license. Moreover, the license must not be place restrictions on other purposes of the data usage in which they are distributed along with the licensed work. For access, as social openness, not only the public users are allowed to get the access the data, but they can get it. As a whole, they should not limit the data accessing by indirect means, such as restrictions on accessing a few items of a database at a time. When considering convenient and modifiable, the materials should be machine readable rather than just human readable. For redistribution, the license shall not restrict or require a royalty or other fee for such sale or distribution. For reuse, the public users are allowed to make use of the data for modifications and distribution under the terms of the original work. For absence of technological restriction, the public users should be able to use the data to modify and distribute without technological obstacles. This can be achieved by the provision of the work in an open data format. This means there should be no restriction, monetary or otherwise, upon its use. For attribution, the usage of the public data should be under the license for redistribution and reuse, that attribution of the contributors and creators to the work. For integrity, the usage of the public data should be under the license for the work being distributed in modified form, that the resulting works carry a different name or version number from the original work. For discrimination against persons or groups, the usage of the public data should be under the license in which there is no discrimination against any person or group of persons. For discrimination against fields of endeavor, the usage of the public data should be under the license in which the unrestrictedly making use of work in specific field of endeavor, such as no restriction of using the open data for business or research fields. For the Queensland public benefits, several benefits from this open data can be categorized as follows. For the public, it generally supports the development of better public services and innovative solutions. It encourages more interactive and mobile access to the government information. Also, it makes the government more accountable to the community. For businesses and researchers, this open data supports higher productivity and streamlining of business processes. It drives innovation and stimulates the economy. Also, it supports research and education, as well as reducing the red tape through more efficient collection of data.
There are a number of open data principles published by the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner that have been adopted by the Queensland government agencies, in addition to the principles laid down by the Premier from earlier. The principles that are to be upheld are that if there is no legal need to protect a dataset, it should be open to public access as a default. Government agencies should consult with the public who will be using the information to determine future policy and delivery directions for open data. As information should be valued as a core strategic asset, effective information governance practices, including a senior agency champion, should be implemented. Similarly, each agency must strive for robust information asset management practices, including governance, data quality, data valuation, clear legal obligations and processes. Information must be made discoverable and be in a usable format. Specific recommendations about an information asset register, metadata, and the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines will be discussed in greater detail on later slides. The licensing and reuse rights of each dataset should be clear and easy to understand, using the Australian Government Open Access and Licensing Framework, or OSGOL. Where a direct cost is associated with a request for information, this should be appropriately charged. Over time, these charges will be reduced as more open data is published. The process of each agency to address inquiries and complaints must be transparent. From a Queensland agency perspective, there are many benefits to this push towards open data. Chief amongst these is the acknowledgement that enterprise information management is vital to the long-term sustainability and success of each and every agency. Enterprise information management is the vehicle that will reduce risk, reduce cost, and improve executive decision-making, while also allowing the goals of open data to be achieved, despite limited and decreasing resourcing available to each agency. The move towards open data will also directly contribute to the following benefits: reduce cost of meeting right to information requests, reduce cost of duplicate datasets held in multiple agencies, improve transparency and trust in government actions and services, and insights into potential improvements to services based on which datasets are accessed regularly. Unfortunately, while the goals and potential benefits of open data are steps in the right direction, there are a lot of issues and constraints to overcome before open data can be rolled out. These constraints are in the areas of resources, cost, prioritization, process, and legality. Resources. As budgets continue to shrink and the range of services required continues to grow, agencies are being faced with tough decisions about where resources should be allocated. Historically, information management has been on a best efforts basis, with more resources being assigned to frontline service delivery and areas such as software and hardware management. To successfully implement an open data direction, both human and financial resources are required. Where will these come from, and what will suffer as a result? Cost. Similarly, there are costs to open data in terms of the effort required to capture, validate, and publish the data. There are costs to update and to extract from existing systems, and if there are any requirements for data to be made available in real time, this represents a significant cost factor. Running counter to this is the current position of senior executives, that there is no current budget put aside for open data, and that any activities should be delivered as part of existing business-as-usual funding. Prioritization. Taking the Department of Transport and Main Roads as an example, they have around 10,000 internally developed systems that may, or may not, store data that would be valuable to the public if published as open data. There are around 1,000 key entities currently mapped in the Enterprise Data Warehouse, with between 12 and 200 attributes for each. The Road Infrastructure Asset Management System alone has nearly 20 years of historical data across 40 separate systems. The cost to sort, categorize, assess, validate, and qualify all of this data would be immense. The question of prioritization, or which data would give the greatest value to be published, is a very important consideration if open data is to be successful. Additionally, if a large group of the public is demanding a specific set of data, but the relevant minister promises a different set, which data set takes priority? Process. For open data to be a sustainable part of everyday business, processes will have to be created to identify, prioritize, categorize, assign metadata to, govern, validate, assess the quality of, and finally publish the data. Once it has been published, there are processes required to update, refresh, assess the usefulness of, and retire datasets. There will need to be processes on how to accept feedback on the datasets, and to take requests for additional datasets to be published. The change to open data will be neither quick nor painless. Legality. Finally, there is the legal and ethical implications that must be considered. Some of the key questions in this area are, is the information currently provided for a fee? That is it currently a source of revenue for the government? Should it then be considered a candidate for open data? Is the data private or commercially sensitive? Can the data be used to identify any particular individual or group, and have they given specific permission for the release of their personal data? Is the data owned by the Queensland Government, and can it be openly licensed? And what is the potential value achieved by the proposed use of the data? Does it outweigh the cost of publishing this data?
The USA case study for open data. Situation. The U.S. state of New York has promised to share comprehensive, digitized medical data provided by doctors and hospitals with patients. According to a case study, it is expected that around 19.5 million residents of New York State will have more chances to access and track their health data, including prescriptions, with appointment memos, send notes to doctor, and even log workouts, blood pressure, and other personal health metrics. With the use of the innovative web portal, it is planned to obtain medical records as easy as online banking. The initiative stage is aimed to create a virtual regular playground for health fans and act as an important resource for the patients with chronic illnesses. This leads to some reminded questions for the types of the provided information and the amount of their content that expected to meet the user needs. The implementation of this New York's patient portal is planned to be simple, as the backbone will feed it with data that already exists. To achieve this, several actions have been taken. First, a health information exchange needs to be developed. This is to allow medical providers to share patient information amongst them. A provider can see what other work has been done, what prescriptions a patient has been given, or what previous test results they have had. In New York, doctors can even trade direct messages through the service. Now, the health information exchange divided geographically into 11 zones in which medical providers are allowed to trade information and communicate on a regional level. Unifying those exchanges into one statewide is another future goal. Secondly, a user-friendly interface should be applied. The user-friendly interface is planned to apply with the following portal in which the patients want to interact with. And finally, the user's inputs should be collected. The patients are asked to provide some inputs about their own information, like workout history or weight. This is still concern for which data from patients will be reliable and a good way to separate it from clinical data. With the link from the backbone of clinical information, this assists the load of the data inputs that required from the patients. Another question can be asked on how to make that kind of database profitable. By taking some actions in the previous part, The results can be stated as follows. Incomplete portal. The medical providers have recently experienced the use of eHealth, but its backbone still remains incomplete due to the fact that the operative database does not cover all medical center areas. This leads to the thoughts about the precision of the actual digitized information, as it is often struggled with the issues of inaccuracies and out-of-dated data. Also, it might confuse the patients, and in worst-case scenarios, they are downright dangerous. Secondly, there are difficulties in collecting the data requirement from the medical providers. Dealing with the data needs from the medical providers leads to the unachievable goal for making the statewide system. Many of medical providers rely on their private vendors to operate the e-record systems, and those vendors are not always enthusiastic about providing patient data easily unless the price is involved or with reasonable offer. Also, there are further development and security issues involved. For the future development, some gaps in medical data are concerned in which the patient gets all of their data. Due to the given case of the electronic health records from the network of hospitals in Brooklyn in 2010, the New York State has tightened its security regulations and intends to use with the following patient portal. This is where all data is securely encrypted with applying additional security factors for both providers and patients. By basing on what I have already mentioned from the USA case study, some key points can be extracted, including the limitation of the data and its security. Related to the case study and the term open data, the information should be clearly defined, its limitation and its levels of coverage. For each data that considered as open, its content needs to be analyzed for the purpose and restriction before releasing to the public. This is to minimize any of possible risks that can be caused by all inappropriate uses of the data. Moreover, all security issues should be studied and applied to develop the protection mechanism as to secure the data and prevent it from those who act as the information thieves, such as upgrading versions of the encryption software for high data security. Secondly, the connection of the data. To allow the users accessing some particular areas, those who manage the open data's content are required to learn from the public users' information needs. This benefits them in approaching the creation of the relevant data, which conceived to be truly useful for their targeted audiences. In addition, the data contents managers have to incorporate with the original data providers in order to keep track and update the published data to its current version as well as concerning of its reliability.
Thanks, John. Comparing to the America, the main drivers of open data in Taiwan are from communities. Even though several laws were launched by government during the past years, they are rarely known among the people. First, several open data platforms were constructed by communities, while the official open data platform was launched in April 2013. It is just a public testing website. Lack of relevant reality practice, most of the department have not been trained to understand what exactly open data is, and this causes the data in the official website are more likely as business report statistics. Overall, the open data in Taiwan government is still in a primary stage. However, through the open data, industries, academic organizations, and general public could make use of the government open data to create innovation services, not only enhance the convenience of life, but also provides commercial use and promote economic development. Everyone is involved in this process, and therefore we should go for it. This is the strategy map that Taiwan government is using to create open data. Start from legal basis. It includes the key legal documents for resources exchange and the procedure of how to do that. Then goes to promotion plan. They promote the e-government actions to increase the basic data availability. Also, using data quality management, they could balance the personal information and the information security to maximum information sources income. When data come in, they unified a consistent data format to keep information organized. Finally, they have one sharing platform to centralize final open data, but decentralize the gathering channels. This is to help encourage relevant open data actions and testing the new methods. Refer to the open data. People always think about democracy or transparent. Open data is not only publishing the data to the audience. Through focusing on these data, people in Taiwan build their hopes after communicating with those data to develop their possibilities to participate in or promote the government decisions. This is to say, through data collection, use, presence, to establish a new data-oriented social participation model in Taiwan. So, through the case study in Taiwan government, some points could be seen. First, it is important to have top-level political support. Public information does not belong to the government. It belongs to the public on whose behalf government is conducted. Greater transparency across government will enable the public to hold politicians and public bodies to account. Also, handling the concerns of data owners. This is one of the expectation management. This open data without the understanding of its meaning makes no sense. After all, it is important to have strong demand side and passion team. The purpose of the government is serving the public. Information is collected by using the tactics from people, so they have the right to ask government to be more open.
If we were to summarise the case studies presented, there are 4 key lessons that Queensland should learn in order to be successful. They are to understand which data is wanted and why, to carefully set the expectations with the public about the quality, timeliness and completeness of the data, especially to begin with, ensure consistency of the approach between Queensland Government departments, and to ensure that there is a top-level support for the publication of data to avoid misuse and exploitation. To overcome the issues and constraints already discussed, a multi-phased approach to implementing open data is being recommended. This implementation plan can largely be carried out using existing resources and for minimal extra cost, but will be delivered over a longer period of time. Each of the 5 phases recommended builds on the phases that have come before. Phase 1 starts with the identification of early candidates for open data publication. This will include any data already published via the agency website, annual reports, and other publications. As these publications are already managed by roles within the organisation, the process for discovering the data behind them should be relatively straightforward. The other category for early publication is any data sets specifically promised by the Minister or another member of government. While these may be harder to find, there is also clear justification for the effort involved in producing them. Once these early candidates are identified, they should be used to develop and trial new processes for the following: determining the potential value of its release, determining the public interest in the dataset, the complexity of the conversion to an open data format, and the governance involved in clearing the datasets for publication. Finally, an activity to determine the appropriate metadata schema should be conducted in parallel. This schema should support the metadata required by the Open Data Portal, while also supporting the internal management of the datasets by each agency. Phase 2 involves working closely with the administrators of the Open Data Portal to understand the processes and touchpoints involved in actually publishing these datasets. These processes should also be mapped so that they can be carried out as part of the day-to-day business of the agency. Also important in making open data a sustainable activity rather than a once-off is the identification and training of the relevant governance roles throughout the organisation. Roles such as data steward and information custodian should be assigned, with the appropriate training and education to allow the people in these roles to carry out their duties. While this represents an element of cost, it is also better practice for enterprise information management and has already been funded as a strategic piece of work for Transport and Main Roads. Finally, for this phase, a peak governance body should be established within the agency to oversee all open data publications. Phase 3 involves the development of a strategy for community engagement. This should include channels such as the Open Data Portal, events such as the Opening the Vault conference, existing stakeholder groups, and social media. As a result of this engagement, a regular schedule of planned publications should be created and in itself published as open data. This will allow publications to be delivered in a staggered, self-contained way and reduce the risk of problems occurring. Finally, the enterprise data warehouse should continue to be developed as a way to streamline both the publishing and the management of datasets that are candidates for open data publication. Phase 4 continues the regular cycle for open data publishing, as well as continued development of the enterprise data warehouse. It is also focused on embedding the processes from earlier phases into the organisation and improving the sustainability of open data. This begins with incorporating open data considerations into existing standards around solution design, development standards, and enterprise architecture. It then moves into analysis of the effectiveness of the early publications and aims to develop some metrics for success. It concludes with the creation of fact sheets for internal staff, covering topics such as what is open data, who do I talk to about it, what formats are considered open, and how do I make my data accessible. Finally, Phase 5 introduces new elements that build on the maturity built through the previous phases, targeting already published datasets for enhancement. For example, this might change the publication frequency from quarterly to weekly, where there is value in doing so, or from moving from a comma-separated values file to XML or to a real-time API.
Thanks, Dave, and thank you all for watching this video. Our talk will end up here, but the data will never end up to be open to you till forever.